Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest you've seen on shows like The Nick, Treme, and now you can see Ntare Guma Mbaho Mwine in his heartbreaking turn as a man being destroyed by guilt in Showtime's The Chi. Let's take a look.
Trace! Trace! We need to talk.
I know I told you to leave me alone, Ronnie.
Spoke to Shantae.
Shantae.
Why don't you tell me about her?
Because it was none of your goddamn business.
She carrying Jason's baby.
Please. That could be anybody's baby. That girl was trying to mess his life up.
How?
Had him talking crazy like he wasn't going to be on the team no more. He wasn't going to go to college.
He loved her. He was up there the night he got shot.
Yeah, so what the fuck do you want, Ronnie?
Why'd you lie to me?
You want the truth? Jason didn't want nothing to do with you. He saw you standing on a corner like you was some bum and he was embarrassed.
That's some fucked up shit to say, Trace.
If you wanted to do something for Jason, you should have did it while he was alive, Ronnie. That's what you should have done.
Everybody, please put your hands together for Ntare Guma Mbaho Mwine. Hey, man.
Hey,
Thanks so much for being here.
thanks for having me in.
Of course. Congratulations on the show.
Thanks. I mean, it's just a blessing to be a part of it and to be sitting here with you talking about it. It's just amazing.
You know, what's it like working on a show like this? Because, you know, you're an actor, you've been on a number of shows before, but this show feels like, I mean, I feel like you probably go into it thinking that it's kind of important, that it represents something. Does it feel like that?
Yeah, this is one where you feel like you want to represent. You know, there's certain places where, we were talking about New Orleans just before, where there's a certain sense of pride and ownership that people have about their city. And there's perceptions about their city that people don't necessarily agree with. And so folks have an ownership. And so when you're coming in to try to tell a story about that place, you really feel a sense of responsibility. And that came hand in hand with this. But the fact that we had Lena and Common, who are both products of Chicago, I think for me helped to ease me into this. Yeah.
And how did you audition for this role? How did you get the role?
Multiple times.
Really?
Yes, it was nerve-wracking. Because when I first got the thing, I was terrified. The audition scene was in the second episode where, sorry if I'm spoiling it for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, but there's a scene where Ronnie is getting high and he's talking to the kid that he killed. That was the audition scene. And it's sort of operatic in scope because you can go so many different ways. I don't smoke, so I wasn't sure how to even try to pull that off. And I didn't think I was right for it. So, they ended up, it was a nerve-wracking journey.
But you got that voice. That voice plays into this, your voice plays into this character so beautifully. I mean, your performance all around is wonderful, but I could imagine an actor going in there and being like, oh, I don't know if I was doing it right, and then being like, but that voice.
Well,
Let's bring him back.
Thank you.
That voice.
Thank you. But I went through, they had me go in like 4 times for Ronnie, and then on the 4th time, they said, we actually want to see you for the role of the detective. And I was like, oh, I can totally play the detective. I played detectives before. So they wanted to test me for the detective, and I was actually really excited. And then at the last minute, they switched and had me test for Ronnie. And at that point, I felt deflated because I thought I'd have no shot at this. Because I thought they were going to find, a bunch of other folks that I had in my head that might be better for the role.
Is it tough playing Ronnie? He really is, as much as he's the big mistake that is the catalyst of the show in a lot of ways, and in other ways he's also kind of the moral center because he's dealing with so much guilt because of what he did.
And I think that's what makes for great drama. I feel really grateful for the writers to, for all the stuff that they've given me. It's the most complex role that I've ever had a chance to play on the small screen. And it was definitely challenging. The journey that he goes from the first episode to the last of the first season is extreme. And I'm curious to hear what you'll think with the twists and turns that have yet to come. But that, to take a kid's life, to do it, he thought was out of an act of love. And
Desperate act of love,
yeah.
like a desperate act of trying to prove, not just guilty over the death of his son, but trying to prove himself in a certain way.
And for any of us who've had that experience of having loved someone and trying to prove your love, and then later realizing that person didn't care for you as much, that's also quite a roller coaster, just in and of itself.
Let's go back to the beginning for you. When did you start acting? How did it start?
Just down the block.
Yeah.
I feel like I've arrived now that I'm here on your talk show, because I was just literally, I used to walk this block for 3 years, taking the D train up the block to NYU.
And you'd walk by every day and go, one day that'll be a talk show in there, and I'll be sitting on that talk show.
Talking to Ricky. Yes.
There'll be a kid named Ricky. I don't know if he's born yet, but we'll get him in there.
Exactly.
How did you discover acting though?
In 3rd grade, we did a play when I was in Boston, Massachusetts. They did a school production of Peter Pan, and I remember it was like a music class, and does anyone want to audition for Peter? And much to my surprise, I found myself standing up, and like, I will, and I was like, I couldn't believe that I was getting up there doing that. I didn't get cast as Peter. I got cast as a pirate, but I still had a blast. That was my first play. And then I didn't do anything in high school. I went to boarding school in Quebec. I was the only black kid in my school, in the class, and they would do plays like The Diary of Anne Frank or The Crucible. And I would be going to the people saying, I think I want to try acting. And they're like, can you run lights? I was like, so I never got to do anything in high school. There was never an opportunity. And I went to University of Virginia for undergrad, and that's when I first started to get my feet wet in terms of...
Were you studying acting there, or were you studying something else?
I studied political. I did a bunch of different things. It was like economics, and it took me a minute to figure out where I wanted to go. And political science and theater ended up being my concentration. Yeah.
What was it like when you told your family that you wanted to be an actor?
I think I might have taken a few years off of their lives, just because my dad went to Harvard Law, and he's a lawyer, and my mom was a psychiatrist or psychologist, and they came from a real academic rigor. And when I said I wanted to go to grad school for acting, they didn't even know that existed.
I love the idea of telling these academic people, I want to go to grad school for acting.
Yeah, exactly. That was it. There was my dad actually came to class at 721 Broadway and sat in on a class once. Wow. And we sat on the floor. It was voice class or something, and he just left and was like, what is this? What are you doing? And so, yeah, I think I started paying for school myself at that point.
They couldn't handle it.
Like, if you really believe in this, you should take it on.
You should take responsibility for it. Yeah, you do this.
But they were really supportive when my first gig was doing the lead in 6 Degrees of Separation, the national tour. We performed at the National Theater in Washington, D.C., and he had been at the World Bank in D.C., so it was huge. And then
that's amazing. Yeah.
He came from Uganda to see that, and I did a play at the Steppenwolf Theater. He came from Uganda to come that. And
what play did you do at Steppenwolf?
It was called Noma Temba with Ladysmith Black Mambazo. Eric Simon directed it, and Tazake Shange wrote it. And then we went to the Kennedy Center with it in D.C., which my dad was thrilled because Wolfenson, who was head of the bank at the time, was also on the board at the Kennedy Center. And so he was like, my son, he's in the Kennedy Center. and so Wolfenson came to the show. We all went out, and so that was really, a really great, a moment that I look back on with pride.
Now you've also done your own one-man show, right? That
the block around
up
here.
the block, right?
Yeah,
Was it at the
Public Theater.
What was that show called and
That
about?
was based on a true a story of a relative of mine who was HIV positive and who was living illegally in the U.S. and had come here because he had no access to treatment back home. And at that time in the 80s, it was a death sentence, as it was in many places. And so he smuggled his way illegally into the U.S. And landed in jail and got out. And when I got out, I said, you know, you've gone through quite a bit. It's like if you should take a journal or write the story down. But sometimes when you're in the middle of a crisis, you don't think about, it's hard to see what's actually happening, you know, in our perspective.
And if you have a minute to write, you usually want to take that minute to not think about the crisis.
Exactly. Yeah. So I came in. And I literally spent a few weeks with him with a tape recorder, and from those recordings, from those interviews, that play was born. And I premiered it at the National Theatre in Uganda. And from there it went to London, and from London it came to New York, the Public Theatre, and made the New York Times Critics' Pick list. And I performed it in front of the African Union, in front of Kofi Annan and over a dozen African heads of state. And yeah, it was quite a trip. That was my first play I'd ever written, so yeah.
What was the process like, you know, workshopping that and putting it together? And did you ever have any hopes while you were in the early stages of it that it would reach, you know, that it would have the potential that it ended up having?
No.
Kofi Annan would see it.
Yeah, I had no idea. Because it was my first play I'd ever written. And sometimes I think when you do things for the first time, you go overboard in terms of the amount of work and commitment and research, and I really dug in. And because it was based on a true story of a family of mine, I felt like I had to do them justice, and that meant, you know, showing some of the ugly stuff too as well. And so I workshopped it in Uganda with several different actors. I did a read-through of the piece at the Ugandan North American Association convention, which happened to be in Vegas. At the time, my uncle was here illegally, and he didn't want people to know it was his story. And I remember when I did the reading at the convention in Las Vegas, there was a Q&A afterwards, and somebody in the audience goes, "You said you don't want to know who this person is, but this person is this, and this. I think I know who it is." And he blurted out this name, and my uncle was in the audience, and I was like, before he said it, I was like, oh, because my uncle would kill me. He's, you know, but he said a different name. And that's when I realized, wow, he's not the only one who's navigating these waters, and that there's other stories like this that are sort of underground. There's a whole myriad of stories of people living underground in extreme circumstances. And when I did the play in Uganda, somebody came up to me, and I had portraits of people who had died from HIV/AIDS who were flashed during a certain section of the play. And she came up to me and goes, "My husband was in one of those photos." And I was taken aback because I had gotten the photo from someone else who had given me permission to use it. And I go, do you want me to take it out? I'm sorry, I didn't mean. She goes, no, this is the first time anyone's telling his story. And she didn't say Biro, my uncle's story. She said her husband's story. And I thought that was really, that hit home, because I really felt like we were tapping into something. Yeah.
Now, can I ask, what is it like? The life of a working actor can be a struggle. And I don't mean that economically.
Yeah.
I mean that in the way that you would go potentially from performing this personal, beautiful play at the public in front of Kofi Annan to doing, performing at the Kennedy Center, to probably auditioning for roles that were just like...
I have an audition tomorrow.
You have an audition tomorrow. Yeah. Well, I don't necessarily mean like auditions being bad. I mean like a young actor, a young African-American actor, and having to audition for things that probably do not ring true to you and do not feel real. But you're coming from performing like the most personal piece possible. What is that like? Part of the gig?
It's part of the gig. I'm sure you have the same thing. You might have stuff where you're interviewing somebody, you're like, you know what? This is just clocking in today.
No comment. No comment.
That's what's happening right now. It's
Not at all.
But I'm sure there's
anytime I get to talk to someone who makes their own work, it's like it's an absolute pleasure. That's someone who's embedded in the process.
Yeah. But that came out of, the same thing I went through in primary school or in high school or even in college, where there were opportunities, and so you had to create them. And that's sort of the curse of being an artist, is that you have to create regardless of whether you're performing at the public theater or wherever. You get home and you're still working, your brain is still working, you're trying
Really angry with yourself if you
Exactly.
don't start creating, right?
Well, no, you nitpick what you did, or, yeah, and I'm also a photographer, and I direct as well. So
Direct theater or direct film and
film,
TV?
yeah, I haven't done TV. I'm hoping that maybe if I get a chance on The Shy, yeah, exactly, maybe.
How do you approach that?
I spent the whole first season shadowing every single director. So when I wasn't filming, which was usually only one day a week, I was pretty much there all the time. But even
They knew they could tell they knew you were shadowing.
oh yeah, I had to get
okay.
it cleared by the producers.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you just shadowed on your own, and they were like,
who's
they're like,
that?
"What's he doing over there? He thinks he's going to direct."
I'm sure there's some who are probably saying that still. But yeah, I'd get to see the whole pre-production and go on tech scouts, and so it was really. I did that when I was on Treme as well. I shadowed every director on Treme, and when I worked with Soderbergh on the Nick, I tried to watch him work as much as possible.
Well, that's a different beast, though, right? I mean, Soderbergh, I feel like that's not learning how to exist within the ecosystem of television. That's just like a weirdo doing his crazy thing. Like,
He
I don't mean a weirdo in a bad way. I just mean
No.
like he operates in a way that is
on a whole different level.
Yeah.
He would film like the first half of the day, we'd shoot everything, and then the second half of the day he was editing the stuff that he had shot, and he was his own DP. And I had the gumption to try to tell him, I'm interested in directing too. And I didn't know how, some people respond that just kind of brush you off. But he's like, oh, really? Cool. What kind of stuff do you do? And I said, well, I do some experimental works. And at the time, one of my films was screening in London at the Institute of Contemporary Art. And he was like, oh, send me a link. And I was like, okay. So I sent him, I thought he was going to be too busy to watch anything. So I sent him like 1-minute teasers or 30-second teasers of my films. And he sent an email back, goes like, why'd you send me just the teasers? Can you send me the full-length things? And I was like, holy shit, he actually watched the stuff. And he watched them, and he said, this is off the hook. And he's like, So that for me was like a real sign of an artist, because he didn't know who I was. He didn't know, but he took the interest to actually take a look at my stuff. And I have other friends who I've emailed work to, who I'm still waiting to get feedback from. But, he took the time to actually look and give feedback, and I've kept in touch, and every time I'm doing something new, I'd shoot him an email, and much to my surprise, he'd reply, and I'm just like, wow.
Much to your surprise, he replied.
Yeah, because you look at him and you go, how do you do what you do? Because he seems to have his hands and feet and whole entire body, everything in so many different places. Yeah.
It's one of those things. I mean, you shadow a director on The Shy, and I bet they've got their DP over here, and they've got this, and everything's kind of organized. And from what I understand about Soderbergh, is shadowing him would just be, I don't know if you could really learn anything, because everything is just him.
Yeah.
in a
What I did learn was his sense of play.
Yeah.
We never rehearsed anything. I mean, he would just go, feel free to use the space.
Right.
And he would follow. It was completely different than anything else I'd done before, where we'd have a rehearsal, they'd then set marks, and then the lighting crew would come in and do the lighting, and then we'd last looks. There's none of that. We'd arrive on set, okay, let's go.
That forces you as an actor to bring your A game, because that's essentially like, this is on you, make it good.
Yeah.
Bring some ideas to the table, because you've got the space.
Yeah, he trusts you. He doesn't, I remember seeing somebody ask a question, and you could feel like there's a little impatience, because he was like, you're doing it. So that was, for me, it was like a reminder that we're all just here playing. Yeah.
What was it like on the Treme?
Treme was incredible, because it was like The Shy, in the sense that it's a city that has its own life, and it was a major character in the piece, and it does half of the work. I think in terms of like The Shy, the city is the star of the show. It gave birth to the creators of the show. In that way, Treme was also the star of the show. It's like you couldn't have built the sets like there was. it's just so rich in history and detail and controversy. And
You feel that in your bones when you go to New Orleans.
yeah,
It's just like
you were just there
I
for
was
Mardi
just
Gras.
there, yeah. I cry there. I cry when I leave. I just love that city so much. There's something about it, you know? You get there and you're just, something takes you over. It
Yeah.
feels incredible.
Yeah.
And I was there for Mardi Gras. Whatever.
There was a break in filming here. That's why you got to do a show in New Orleans.
I would love to do a show in New Orleans. Also, I'd just like to say, I was there for Mardi Gras, but if you've never been for Mardi Gras, it's not all people on balconies throwing beads and, you know, braless. Most of it isn't that. It's
Yeah.
this incredible, like, loving party that the city has.
Yeah.
It's just like, you've never felt anything like it,
Yeah.
you know? There's 2 blocks
Yeah.
that are the thing that gets shown all the time.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
rest of the city is just incredible.
Yeah.
I was under the overpass in the Treme for Mardi Gras watching the
wow.
floats come in. It was
Yeah.
just it's the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And getting to discover the city through the eyes of the show was also huge because I got to see behind the scenes in restaurants and just all the locations we were able to get to, the worlds that we were able to get into that I probably would never have discovered on my own was a real treat.
When you get the chance to work with people like David Simon, Steven Soderbergh, Lena, I mean, do you immediately think to yourself, how can I sort of steal whatever I can from that?
Of course.
Yeah.
I spent the whole time when I used to, take every minute I can to be hovering around and drinking in as much as I can, because for me it's like being in school. You can really, make the most. I try to make the most of that time. I don't go back to my trailer and hang out, or on my days off I'm not like at the hotel or whatever. I'm literally on set at the crew call. Yeah.
Just hanging out?
Just watching and learning and stealing. Yeah, because I ultimately hope to be able to create as well one day, create my own show, and this is my school or my learning. Yeah.
Well, let's get some questions from the audience. Who has a question?
You wrote a play and you did some photography and a documentary, I guess maybe based on your uncle's story. Now that you've worked on this show, is that something that you still want to pursue? Maybe other stories that you've heard that have interested you, like doing other like photography or documentary filmmaking?
Yes, I'm constantly working on new stuff. I was just in Toronto last week and shot some stuff there, and I was in Uganda over the holidays, Christmas holidays, and took some time to shoot some footage there. I have another project I'm working on with this photographer whose work I discovered from the 70s and 80s, who unfortunately passed away, but I collected all of his work that I'm hoping to put out as well and do a documentary on that. Yeah, thank you.
Photographer's name?
Chibate Aloysius Salongo. If you go into my Instagram page, I have a 1-minute clip with his work and a brief. You get to see him in his studio. And I collected like thousands of negatives of his. And it was only recently I was able to afford to be able to digitize them all. And I digitized over 3,000 images and selected about 300 of them and went back to Uganda and met his wife and showed her this book of his work that I thought were some of the most striking images, and said, do you know any of these folks in this who are photographed in here? Because I would love to be able to meet them and photograph them now. And she was like, yeah, this is this person, this is this person, this is this person. This was like Christmas Eve, and I go, do you think you can get them on the 1st? Because I'm coming back through the town. And I came back on the 1st, and on my Instagram page there's a photograph of like 30 or 40 people who this photographer had photographed 20 or 30 years earlier that I photographed again. And so this is an ongoing process. A lot of them hadn't seen their portrait or had lost it since that time, and so I promised to bring them that print of their original portrait and the one that I took.
What is it about this photographer that you love?
He loves what he does. He's like Soderbergh of this small town in Mbirizi in Uganda. He wasn't doing it for anybody else. He was going out documenting people's lives. He didn't exhibit his stuff. He was a portrait studio photographer and an incredible body of work. I mean, look at the volume of work that he did. I'm still digitizing a lot of stuff. And for me, you can't help but fall in love. There's people who paint in their garage and they just keep a pile of work that they just have to do. And he's like that. And those are the kind of people I'm drawn to. Yeah.
Next question.
Hi. You have studied in London and Moscow. You've shot your own movies in Uganda. When you were working with all these different cultures, what was the most fascinating experience for you to kind of see the different take that these actors have on the art of acting?
And where are you from? Sorry. You have
Republic of Georgia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Well,
lived in Russia.
I studied at the Moscow Arts Theater in Russia. And the only word I remember is morozhene. Do you know, does that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's ice cream.
Ice cream. And for me, getting the opportunity to go study at the Moscow Arts Theater was really a view into a whole other world of approach to the craft. And that's what's been so exciting, is to be able to see, different approaches, because we get sort of stuck in this one way of thinking. But I've been grateful for the opportunity to be able to travel and see different worlds and see different interpretations of looking at the script. And for me, even this role of Ronnie on The Shy has been a very different take, because I felt so disconnected from the role, or so different, that I actually, from the first time, actually worked outside in. Like, usually I'll feel connected in a way, or find a way into the world, like through some internal way, but I don't know anything about the South Side of Chicago. I don't know a lot of the stuff that he's been through, and so for me it was about working on some of the externals and hoping that that would somehow translate. And that's a very British way of working. Laurence Olivier famously told Dustin Hoffman, why don't you try acting, my dear boy, And I was doing more of the Hoffman approach before. But with Ronnie, I feel like I was doing more along the Olivier side of, putting something on, putting a costume on, having a chew stick, or putting an accent on, or having a certain walk, or that helped inform the character.
I think we have time for one more.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, you're missing your beard.
Yes. I think it takes a few years off.
Yeah.
But well, that's good.
Well, congrats on all of your success. I love the show. It's definitely a part of the human experience and also the Black experience, to be quite honest. It gives an intricate look inside of, the inner city struggles. So, within your role, how has that either motivated you or inspired you or even moved you, playing that role?
Well, there's, as I was saying in the beginning, you want to do right and do justice and do, And so for one of my main ways to try to figure out how to do that was relying on folks from Chicago. And one of those key people was Curtis Toller, who was they brought in as a special advisor for the show. And I would literally go show him my sides for the day or the script and say, does this look okay? Or would you say anything different? And he would give me adjustments sometimes. And I'm really made a strong connection with him in terms of him helping me guide me through this world that was new to me. And I'm hoping with the second season, if I have time, is really to be able to help in some of the work that he's doing with the advocacy work he's doing, working with the local communities, working with help keep kids off the streets or out of trouble, or help people turn their lives around. And that's really grateful for the second season, because I didn't have a chance to do that much the first season, but I'm hoping to be able to do that kind of outreach, especially now because people will know the show, and so there's sometimes a greater opportunity to do that. In the first season, nobody really knew what we were doing, so. Oh, cool. Thank you so much for tuning in.
And congrats again.
Thank you.
Ntare, thank you so much for being here. The Shy is on Sunday nights, 10 p.m. Showtime. I think there's only a few episodes left in the season, right?
Three more big ones coming up. 7, 8, 9, 4. 10, 7, 8, 9, 10.
And there's a big twist, or not a big twist, but a big revelation with your character coming in this Sunday's episode. So everybody tune in. Everybody give a round of applause for Ntare. Let's hear it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.